The first psalm in God's praise book is about turning away from the way of life that we see around us and not being conformed to this age, as Paul says. It's about a way of life that's blessed by God and a way of life that is cursed by God. It's an interesting theme to have in a worship time. It begins with the kind of reasoning that's cursed. We looked at that yesterday. And then it goes on to the way of reasoning that's blessed by God. And I call that top-down reasoning. God blesses the person who delights in him and in what he has said. And the person who reasons from his word down into every area of life. They're thinking about relationships, economics, politics, business, education, entertainment are all shaped by top-down thinking from what God has said in his word and then applying that into the life that they're living. And there are some really important words in this second verse, just in one verse. And I want to unfold those a bit. The first is the word Yahweh. It's the word capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, as we find it in the Psalms. And that word actually is based on the translation of Adonai or Lord in the Hebrew. It was the Hebrew word for Lord, but the original word was the word that God used when he revealed himself to Moses and established his covenant with Israel. It's the word based on the consonants YHWH, and the nearest pronunciation we're aware of is Yahweh. So where we find capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, in the Hebrew that would be Yahweh. But the Jews considered that name too holy to pronounce, and so they substituted the word Adonai, and that's why we find the word Lord in the Psalms. And there are other words for God in the Old Testament, Elohim, but this word Yahweh has special significance, and it has to have been a false kind of reverence for God that caused it to stop being used. And in fact, the fact that even as Christians we don't use it today, we are missing out on some of the significance of that name. It was the name that God revealed in the context of creating a covenant relationship with sinful people. The people of Israel had been in Egypt for hundreds of years. They had become idolaters. They worshipped Egyptian gods. And yet God, in his mercy and grace, came to a sinful people, delivered them, redeemed them, and brought them out of that slavery to bring them into his promised land. And this is at the heart of what the revelation of the name Yahweh is about. It's based on the Hebrew verb for I am, and that's because God is the one who is. He is the source of all being. He doesn't derive his being from anyone, but gives being to everything else that is not God. And so he is Yahweh, the God of all being, the great I am. But he is, when he revealed it to Moses, he made very clear that he was revealing his name in Exodus 3 and Exodus 34 in connection with a special aspect of his love, which was his grace, or his, in Hebrew, hesed, his covenant marriage love. Love that wasn't a response that God was making to people who loved him first, but it was in spite of their rebellion, their sin, and their waywardness. He was loving people who deserved the opposite, who deserved his judgment and wrath. And God made it really clear in Exodus that this was the name he wanted his covenant people to use. It was like being on first name terms with somebody would be a special privilege. And God was saying, my name for you is Yahweh. This is the special privilege you have, is to call on my name, to pray to me in my name, to believe in my name, and to let the whole world know that is worshipping idols and false gods, let them know who I am. So as God, as El or Elohim, he is indeed creator and judge. But as Yahweh, he was the God who forgave and saved and rescued the kind of people described in verse 1 in the psalm, the wicked, the ungodly, the cynical, and so on. When they turn from their ways, he will be Yahweh to them. So that's the first word. And I've kept the word Yahweh in my versions of the Psalms. The second word is law, because the word law sounds like to us purely and only about commands. But the Hebrew word used here is the word Torah, and it means instruction and teaching. The Jews applied it especially to the first 5 books of Moses, but in general it means to be taught, to be instructed. And the Torah means God's revelation to man of how he thinks and reasons and how he communicates to people about how he thinks in a written form in the Torah, sacred writings. God has given us, he has spoken, but not just spoken, he has written, caused to be written down what he has said. And so Torah contains the record of his words, his actions, his promises, as well as his commands. The next word is the word delight, because it doesn't say the person is blessed just who conforms to the Torah, but who takes inward pleasure in the Torah. They delight in God's written word. And of course, Psalm 119, it's the longest psalm in the Psalter, and it expands on what does it mean to delight in the word of God. Well, when you read Psalm 119 and sing it, you're discovering what that delight is really like. And then the fourth word is meditate. The word meditate is based on the word to sort of mutter. And it was not just something you did in silence, if you want. It was something you would do speaking to yourself or repeating the words that you were meditating on as you kept turning them over in your mind. To meditate meant to concentrate, to really focus on what the Word of God was saying and what you were reading about or what you were singing about. And it was thinking about how it applied in every situation in life 24/7. He meditates on God's law and he does it day and night. In other words, even when he's awake dealing with anxieties or fears or the issues that tend to come into our minds at night when we're vulnerable, his mind goes to the Word of God and what the Word of God says about these things, as well as how to apply it during the day. And so meditating, for instance, on this psalm is one thing that God blesses. As we take a psalm like this and meditate on it as we sing it and allow the words by the grace of the Spirit to go deep into our hearts. Paul says that it's singing about this, singing about what Psalm 1's about to one another that leads us to being filled with the Spirit. Because it enables us to turn from bottom-up thinking to top-down thinking in our daily lives. And that's what singing the Psalms is really about. So I'm going to sing the Psalm again, Psalm 1, to the same tune. How blessed by God is he who turns from what the wicked say, who does not stand within their paths or keep fools' company, or keep fools' company. But his delight is in the Torah of Yahweh his God, and day and night he meditates upon his holy law, upon his holy law. He's like a tree by flowing streams with leaves forever green, which in its season bears much fruit, and all he does succeeds, and all he does succeeds. Not so the wicked, they are like chaff scattered by the breeze. Before the judge they cannot stand, or with the godly meet, or with the godly meet. For over all his righteous ones Yahweh is keeping watch. Death and destruction tracks down all who choose a sinful path, who choose a Savior.